Composition in cinematography and lenses and the choice that you have for what lens you use for what kind of composition and what kind of frame you're creating is the first access point to telling the story. It's the first thing that we see. It's how you introduce the audience into this world that you're going to take them on this journey through. And so much of what I do when I compose a frame or when I light a frame or choose a lens for a frame is based on my knowledge that I have from still photography and from painting, and from understanding where someone's eye is drawn in a frame, the amount of contrast that's there because of the light, or the size of the object in the frame. And all of those elements are dictated by the lenses that you're using. And if you want to shoot an intimate close-up with someone and you're on the wrong lens, you're going to feel that you're on the wrong lens for that. And when you're on the right lens, you feel that you're on the right lens, and it's the most wonderful thing to watch that scene unfold, whether that be in a narrative or a documentary scenario. My name is Cohen, and I'm a cinematographer. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and then moved out to Los Angeles for undergrad, which I studied painting and photography at UCLA. I grew up with a black and white darkroom. I just learned to develop negatives when I was 13 years old, and basically until I graduated high school lived in a darkroom. And from painting and photography, which was very individual art, I kind of shifted over into a more collaborative art when I took a cinematography course over the summer. And it's kind of silly, but I basically saw that frames going through a camera were the same thing as frames inside of a still camera. A motion picture camera just had more of them. And I was drawn to that and wanted to kind of see that as the next step of what I was going to do. For the past few years, I've been focusing a lot on documentaries that are about humanitarian efforts or social justice issues. And it's very rewarding. And I find it really interesting and fascinating to be able to craft and tell a story that is something that's really happening in the moment. And then at the same time, certain directors that I worked with started working in the virtual reality space pretty early on, a few years ago. And every once in a while we do virtual reality projects as well. And then my name kind of got out there for being a VR cinematographer. And that led me to other people and connecting on other projects. And I feel like I have a really solid foot with documentary work, and it's like somewhere with narrative and VR as well. The project that I have here at Sundance is Ashe 68, which is a short retelling of Arthur Ashe winning the 1968 US Open. And it is a multimedia project that combines live action with sand art animation as well as archival footage. And it's about 7 minutes long, and it was a very technically complicated project to shoot because of those multimedia elements. There are 4 scenes that are live action in this short film, and all of them were dictated off of the one most complicated scene, which is the match point when Arthur Ashe wins the US Open. And they wanted to recreate the exact tennis play of that match point by having the viewer on the tennis court standing next to Arthur Ashe when he hits that return and wins. And if you think about stitch lines in VR and needing to match an actual tennis match that happened back in 1968, for the talent to get that right on set and for the stitch lines to not be over where the main part of play is, it was pretty complicated. The background was going to be replaced by sand art animation because 2017 when we filmed in New York does not look like 1968. So the entire tennis court was wrapped in chroma blue screen, and we wanted to be as close to the talent as possible when he hits this return serve and then kind of walks back to towards the camera. And he's also 6'7". So we needed a really high resolution for the VFX elements. We needed a really high frame rate. We needed to be able to be as close as possible without cropping anything. And I needed a sensor that could do that with a field of view lens that wasn't going to crop in on the sensor at 120 frames. Because we needed to recreate actual tennis that was happening, we didn't want to have any stitch lines over the talent or the tennis ball. So I had to divide up the court in 2 hemispheres. I got a 4.millimeter crazy fisheye lens that there was like 4 of them in the US that was going to cover what claims to be a 250-degree field of view. And I only needed about 200 of that 250 to really be workable. And we staged all of the action and the tennis. We positioned the camera inside of the action of the tennis in exactly the right place, where the start of the serve was on one side and then the return was just on the other side of this line. And we filmed it all in that direction one time, and then we turned the camera around and filmed the other direction, which was none of the field of view of play, but to complete the sphere for the 360 environment. And it ended up only being 1 camera and 1 lens combination that was gonna work. That was it. The camera was a Canon C700 with a Codex external back, paired with an Entenaya 4.3 millimeter crazy fisheye 250 field of view lens I have no idea why this lens even exists to use, but we used it and it worked. It was crazy. And also the talent was 6'7", and he needed to be as close to the lens as possible at the end. So it was like, does he fit? Barely fit. Filming Ashe 68 was different than any documentary. It's different than any other virtual reality project I've done. And the skills that I needed were based on the narrative cinematography work that I do and that I know. And it drew on all of the VFX skills that we've been using for years. It was nothing new. Nodal, working with a nodal head around a nodal point is pretty old school technology. And VFX, just chroma blue and replacing that with sand art animation. It was just a bigger scale for VR than something I had worked with before. But had I not been trained in narrative filmmaking to understand all of these elements, it would have been pretty complicated. The tools that I use vary depending on what project it is, and it ranges across the board because I work in such a variety of projects. And a documentary package will sometimes be as small as I can make it, and sometimes I get to be a little bit larger, depending on what the delivery is for it. And a virtual reality project runs the gamut. So sometimes it's on unibody VR cameras that really aren't that controllable. And then sometimes the project most recently that I worked on was shot nodally. So we were able to actually use a cinema camera with a cinema lens and control that environment the way that I normally would on a narrative project. Pre-production and prep on any project is really exciting for me, and it's a lot of fun. And it starts even before I'm attached to the project. So if I get a script from someone or a director, and I work in the independent world mostly, so I like to ask for music or a playlist to put on when I'm reading the script, because that sets a tone and a foundation for me of what the feel is. I want visual references, I want paintings, I want movies, I want everything that the director can give me that's their version of it. And at the same time, I'm doing my own work. And my own work goes back to a lot of fine art and old paintings and inspirational elements that might be textures and might be materials or furniture even, or spaces that just feel like they're the right fit for this kind of scene. Being able to translate textures and sounds and materials into motion picture is the exciting part of prep for me, and being able to take all of those sensory elements and then mix them together and make an image. My advice for younger filmmakers that are maybe just out of film school or trying to get in the industry is, I would say, take every opportunity you can for work, because you're starting to figure out what it is that you like and what it is you like to film, and the way that different projects run is very different. Narrative projects and fiction work a certain way that's a little bit more structured. Documentaries can be haphazard and all over the place. Virtual reality can be, who knows what, it's a toss-up with that. But there's certain kinds of environments that I found myself really drawn to because of the way that we were filming. And I really liked the structure of fiction, and I liked the rigid pre-production, production, and the time, and this has to be shot, and that kind of big system. That was something that I really was drawn to. But then I found that I needed to balance it with sort of this like renegade documentaries where you're kind of running around and running after something and capturing it. That felt so freeing in comparison. So I found that I needed a really good comparison. So I think that it's important to try out every kind of project that's out there and see what it is that you're really drawn to.